Glenn Beck program. America, great news. Didn't save a bunch on my car insurance, but almost as good. Today, we hit $14.294 trillion, our debt ceiling. And people said it couldn't be done. We're number one. On the bright side, the federal government, at least at the moment, cannot borrow any more money from the public even if they wanted to. But President Obama says a solution isn't reached in America. Well, we'll head back into a financial crisis. I got news for you, gang. We're going there anyway. I mean, it sounds really spooky when he says it. But then again, the political talks being held to find a solution are being held by the one and only Vice President Joe Biden. You know, the same guy who is leading us into spending billions more on high-speed rail, and the guy who oversaw the stimulus package. So what could possibly go wrong with any of this, really? Well, hello, America. Earlier this year, I said, get ready and roll up your sleeves because this summer is going to be one that will require compassion and courage. I'm going to tell you what I announced to my radio audience here in just a few minutes. Compassion and courage, it's no exaggeration. I'll give you the details in just a few minutes. This weekend was the anniversary of Israel's independence. Last week, I was there in Jerusalem, and I described to you the joy that I saw of those who celebrated this independence. But this weekend, we saw the exact opposite. Demonstrators flooding Israel's borders to protest the anniversary, to which they refer to as Nakba Day, which means Day of Catastrophe. The clashes with Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, occurred mainly along the hostile border areas of Syria, Jordan, and the West Bank, and Gaza, left 16 people dead. They climbed fences in an attempt to overwhelm security forces, and many did get in. Hundreds later were captured. The protests were organized on Facebook. This is the first time that this tactic, the social media organizing, has been directed at Israel. We told you that it would happen, and mark my words, America, what is happening on the borders in Israel is coming to our borders someday. The Palestinians, see if this sounds familiar, Palestinians are talking about stolen land and the oppressor. What makes you think it'll remain in Israel? It's happening already in the school in Tucson. We showed you last week. Our children in our country are being taught that America stole the land from Mexico and we are the oppressors. This is just a warm-up. There are also protests at Israel's embassy in Cairo, where 350 were injured this weekend. Regular viewers of this program knew that this kind of unrest was coming this weekend. Watch. So, May 15th. There are several things that are happening in May. One is the flotilla, right around that time period. Facebook had one of their big mass protests happening, I think it was on May 15th, and then that was taken down, and another one that was to march and take the land from Israel. And this is what is on the website. Judgment Day will be brought upon us only once the Muslims have killed all the Jews. Jeez. I fear there is something happening here in May. And I went on to say the other bookend is in September. The unrest has subsided for now, but it is not going to continue that way. The flotilla is still on its way, and this will get stronger and stronger, and flashpoints will happen more and more frequently, and it will culminate in September, and the world will have to decide what to do. The fallout has only begun from just this weekend. Benjamin Netanyahu is calling the Syrian border confrontation staged by the Syrian government as to distract from the massive unrest in their own country. Is that true? Seems to be working. Is anybody talking about how the Syrians are gunning down the protesters in their own streets? No, the news this weekend with the complicit media here in America is all about those evil Israelis. And the media is all too willing to promote pictures that portray Israel as the giant evil oppressor and the Palestinians as the poor innocent souls on the receiving end of the boot from Israel. The prime minister of Hamas now has come out and said that they will not recognize Israel and urged all Muslim worshippers to pray for an end to Israel. Called on Netanyahu to return to the borders back on how they were pre-1967. If he's serious about peace, they say. That's what the so-called two-state solution means. It means that the borders will cut Jerusalem, and you will have a border that runs here. And so you, the rest of the world, will not be able to go into the old city of Jerusalem, the holy city. All of the religious sites for the most prominent religions in the world will go to the Arabs. And it's not just the Mideast. This protest and this gearing to get people to accept this two-state solution is happening now in Washington as well. Code Pink is holding a rally in D.C. to protest Benjamin Netanyahu's visit. They plan to honor Helen Thomas, of all people. They invited her to speak, but she didn't want to be a distraction, so she withdrew. Instead, she's just attending as a journalist. Here she is, in case you forgot.
Any comments on Israel? We're asking everybody today. Any comments
Tell them
on
to
Israel?
get the hell out of Palestine.
Ooh. Any better comments on that?
Remember, these people are occupied, and it's their land. It's not German, it's not Poland.
So where should they go? What should they do?
They go home.
Where's the home?
Poland,
So the Jews...
Germany.
I mean, I don't see how people don't see the difference between good and evil. The world is ramping up, and Israel is being set up. Believe me, by September, it will be bottom up, top down, and inside out, and people will beg, Israel, just compromise. There is good and evil in the world, and those with eyes must see it, those with ears must hear it, and those with mouths must say it. The Middle East is lining up to take a stand on Israel, and the whole world is lining up behind them. Iran is reportedly active in this weekend's protest on Israel. We've shown you the Arab Spring, which caused Iran to make all kinds of new friends all across the Middle East. They're uniting against an easy target. It's basically this, what we told you in January. Do you have this? The radical Islamists, communists, and socialists will all work against Israel, work against capitalism, work together to overturn stability. They will cascade, sweep the Middle East, begin to destabilize Europe and the rest of the world. That is happening, gang. And I know I was called a crackpot in January for telling you that, but that is what is happening. All right. Now, the country that wants to wipe Israel off the map and run the Jews into the sea is making nice with Turkey and the Muslim Brotherhood, the group that wants to start war with Israel and destroy it, and our CIA and our president says, they're fine, and they're gaining more and more power. This quote is from a prominent, wealthy, liberal activist in Egypt. Quote, they have substituted the dictatorship of Mubarak with the dictatorship of the Muslim Brotherhood. That's where Egypt is going now. Gee, I wish the world would have listened in January. Ask yourself this question. When you look at the events in the Middle East that are happening, are they making Israel, America, and those people in Arab countries that really truly want freedom more safe or less safe? That's an easy answer. You and I are probably an awful lot alike. It wasn't too long ago that I would have said, let them solve it themselves, two-state solution. I don't really care. What difference does it make to me? Well, it does make a difference. It matters to you and me. Well, you may hear the strife of the Palestinians. Are you hearing the strife of the Christians being targeted in Egypt, or the Jews that are being targeted? This is from Egypt. They're burning churches. Gang, we're all in this together. I don't care what religion you are. Does anyone really believe when Israel is forced into a two-state solution that the Middle East will suddenly be calm and stable and all of these things will be solved? Let me tell you something. If you disarm Hamas and Hezbollah and the radicals in the Middle East, there will be peace. If you disarm Israel, there will be no Israel and no peace. I contend, if there is no Israel, we are shortly behind. The most holy sites on the planet are there. Ask yourself this question. Do you believe that when they are in Arab control, like those big Buddhist statues with the Taliban, that they will remain open and safe. We have the Western Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's the place where Jesus apparently was killed and was buried and rose again. The Mount of Olives, the site of the Last Supper. The Temple Mount, the foundation stone. It's where Abraham went with Isaac. All of it. All in this one place. If you go back to the way it was cut up in 1967, Christians and Jews will not be allowed to see these holy sites again. They are attacking us using religion, and they're doing it in the name of peace, and it will not work. There is real evil in the world. There always has been, but there are different times when different people need to speak out. This guy is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's a German. He was a Lutheran minister. He was a guy who spoke out against Adolf Hitler on his first day in office. First day in office, he said, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guilty. Not to speak is to speak. Not to stand is to stand." People of all faiths need to stand together. Last weekend, I was in Israel, and I met with a man named Rabbi Riskin. He's a leading voice and renowned for his innovative educational and social action programs. I don't know if I agree with him on politics or not. I don't really care. I know he's under attack in some quarters because in his position, rabbis don't usually meet with Christians and talk about Ezekiel. But he's reaching out as much as he can. And there are many people in Israel that are doing that. Rabbi Riskin told me he was convinced that God is asking him to gather people of all faiths to stand together. Jews, Christians, Muslim, it doesn't matter. I believe the same thing. I have been made fun of for my tendency to challenge you to act. I mean, I made a list here. The 9/12 Project, 40-day and 40-night challenge. 828, it's where we all met in Washington to restore honor. The Wilmington lesson, I said this town can lead us out and teach us. Clean up your own life with E4. I wasn't sure exactly how all of these things tied together until recently. And earlier this year, right before I came back from vacation, I knew. And I knew what was supposed to happen next. Last year, I actually thought restoring honor would be really kind of like my last hurrah, and be like, okay. I believe now it was just a precursor. This is what we did last August in Washington, D.C. This August, I'm going to be holding another event that I am calling Restoring Courage. This time, I ask you to meet me in Jerusalem. I mentioned Dietrich Bonhoeffer a few minutes ago. He has played a big role in my life recently. I believe, as he believed at those times, that trouble is coming for our Jewish friends and neighbors. And I believe that means something to all of us. We promised we would never forget and never let it happen again. I don't know if it's going to happen again now, but evil, an old familiar evil, is rearing its ugly head. Bonhoeffer, in 1933, was ahead of the curve, I guess. It's good to be ahead of the curve, but he never really got any traction. Nobody would listen. I think it was too late. When he asked people to stand, he got about 6 people to stand with him. I'm not kidding you. 6. I believe that we are ahead of the curve. Before the trouble starts, we have an opportunity as a world, as humans, to stand together before things get out of control. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. Earlier this year, as I quite honestly tried to get away from my feelings on this and say, no, this is crazy, I read the book of Esther and the book of Ruth. In the book of Ruth, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said, and I'm horribly butchering this story, but read it for yourself. After all their husbands died, Mom said, come on, ladies, leave me, go find a husband. I'm not going to have any more boys that you can marry. And Ruth replied, do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. That is an act of courage. And that is what needs to be said to Israel and to the world and to God. What God commands to be said through his prophets of old. This August, I will stand where he has always been, in the ancient walls of the city of Jerusalem. I ask you tonight to spread the word and put the call out to the entire world to stand. It will be expensive to get there. It might be dangerous. And, you know, honestly, it might just be you and me and like 4 other people. I don't know. But I ask you, has there ever been a time in the history of man, in a relative period of peace and calm, before the storm really got underway, has there ever been a call to return to his city, a call to stand and to be counted? I ask you tonight to search yourself for what you believe about Israel and the Jews and our relationship. I ask you tonight to speak to your spouse and know where you stand and what that means. It's better to decide now. On 8/28 at the Lincoln Memorial, I quoted from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, "The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, while it can never forget what they did here. It is rather for us, the living, to stand here. We here to be dedicated to the great task remaining before us." I say to you again tonight, with just a slight revision, the world will little note nor long remember what we say here. But this August in Jerusalem, possibly for the first time in man's history, God will remember and make note of what we do there. For more information, even if you can only attend electronically, go to glennbeck.com now. We just announced that we're going to do a follow-up of 8/28. This time it's not going to be in Washington, it's going to be in Jerusalem. And we haven't announced the exact date yet, but we will, I believe, by Friday. Shortly after midnight this past Tuesday, when I was in Jerusalem, I met with the mayor of Jerusalem at Ben Gurion International Airport, and I laid out an overview of what I wanted to do in his city. If he was shocked, he didn't show it. If he thought I was being overly ambitious or a little nuts, he didn't hint at it. All he said to me was, "Jerusalem will be your partner in making it happen." We are grateful that he happens to be here today. Nir Barkat is the mayor of Jerusalem. Welcome, Mr. Mayor. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Wonderful being here.
You know, it was really funny because we started putting this together, and somebody said to me, it'll never happen. It can never happen. First of all, you're going to have to get with the mayor. And I said, he happens to be on my flight going back to New York. And we happened to meet there at the airport. I want to talk to you a little bit about the city of Jerusalem and what we're kind of doing future news here tonight. Because I think the world is pushing Israel, and the world is just going to start going towards this two-state solution, which you kind of say is kind of a false premise.
Well, let's focus on Jerusalem as an example. Jerusalem, since the reunification of the city in '67, is totally open for freedom of religion. The Jews manage the Jewish sites, the Muslim sites, the Christians manage the Christian sites. It was never like that. My goal and role is to open up Jerusalem for the benefit of the world to enjoy, to make sure people can come and taste the spiritualism, the holiness, the history, the culture. Mm-hmm. And indeed, we see a rise in the number of tourists and the excitement that tourists have in the city of Jerusalem. My vision is to develop that, to encourage more people to come peacefully to enjoy the international city the way it is today. It was never like that. God forbid.
If 1967, if I came to Jerusalem, I could not go in to the Church of the Sepulchre.
You had real serious trouble, and the Jews couldn't actually pray in the Temple Mount.
Right.
And so, and throughout the history of the different conquerors of Jerusalem, may it be the Jordanians, the British, the Turks, everybody. They've never kept freedom of religion the way Israel does, the government and municipality, and we will pursue that. It's part of our understanding that we would like to make sure Jerusalem is open for the benefit of the world to enjoy.
Okay. So a two-state solution. They cut, because if people see this, they say the old city of Jerusalem, but that's not Jerusalem. Jerusalem is huge and expanding. This is the old city. This is where the boundary is?
Well, sort of. You pointed right. Glenn, there's not one good example in the world of a city that was split that ever worked. It doesn't work. You know, I'm an entrepreneur in training, and I usually look for comparables, look to see how other cities in the world are successful, and we look at different role models in the world. Every city that, God forbid, was split never worked. It's dysfunctional. And we've proven in the last, since the unification of the city in '67, that we've created a functional city, a strong city that is open for the benefit of the world to enjoy. The Arabs, most of the Muslims and Christians living in Jerusalem don't want to move to a Palestinian state.
Right.
They want to stay a united city.
Tiffany, what was that chart we had up last week? It's like 80% of all Arabs say they want Israeli rule in Jerusalem, right? Do you have that?
It's a big
for you, Glenn.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's
a big number.
It's a big number.
And that means that people know what's good for them. And I do strongly believe, I'm committed to help and serve the Muslim residents, the Christian residents, the Jewish residents. We have to make Jerusalem work better as a
Can
city.
I ask you, what is the rate of, because when you're over here in America, you think of Israel and it's getting shelled and buses are blowing up and people are dying in restaurants, and you go over there, and I said this when I came back, I actually stood in my apartment and looked out over the city here in New York the next day, and I felt safer in Jerusalem than I did here for the one reason: everybody's aware. Everybody's aware. Everybody's been in the military, so everybody can help, and it doesn't matter what happens. Everybody can take action. Here, people are asleep. What is the rate of? I mean, describe Jerusalem on violence.
Violence. If you take violence, for example, this is something that we naturally none of us like to discuss, but murders per every 100,000 people. We're by far the safest city with respect to Washington, D.C., Chicago, even New York. It's a safer city than New York. I remember we've compared notes, and per capita, you have less murders, and you put crime and terror together. We had 9 murders last year in Jerusalem, a population of 800,000 people, which is practically nothing relative to any other city.
How frequent is terror?
Well, I'll tell you, terror has become a global issue,
Yeah.
a global phenomenon. And people should look and understand sometimes things that are happening in Israel and in Jerusalem propagates to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
We now know how to deal with it, and relatively very, very good. So we know how to improve quality of life of all residents. We know how to increase tourism. Tourism is up big time in Jerusalem, big numbers from year to year in the last few years. And I really welcome people. All this political turmoil now in the Middle East does not affect Israel. We're a stable, peace-seeking island in the middle of a big minefield.
My problem has been when President Obama was running for president, he said, I'll sit down with anybody. I'll sit down with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. And now you can't sit down with him. You could sit down and say, look, do you agree on these principles? Because he's not an honest broker. Do you believe there's an honest broker that you could sit down with, the people of Israel could sit down with, and make a two-state solution? Or is it just a game to take more and more and more?
The Middle East, unfortunately, is not a win-win mentality. And the Western world, when it comes to our region, thinking win-win, give and take,
right.
Unfortunately, look at what happens. It doesn't work. When Israel withdrew from Gaza, lots of people said to me, oh, now you'll see how you'll get rewarded by showing that you may be making some steps for a deal. What happened is the Hamas took over democratically, similar to what you've said earlier, in a democratic way similar to Nazi Germany. They want the destruction of Israel. That's their charter. So they're thinking now in a salami-style negotiations, well, we first got Gaza. Let's piggyback ride on this trend against Israel in the world. let's take over the Palestinian Authority, next phase, and then we'll be much better off to destruct Israel, because that's their charter and it has not changed. You see that by what they teach at schools. Generations upon generations are taught that it's fine to die, to kill us, to destruct Israel. You can't negotiate. It would be foolish to negotiate with somebody that wants your destruction.
Nobody
It's
ever
clear
would.
that there's no stopping mechanism to a deal.
Okay, let me just give you this poll number, then we're going to take a break. Last January, a poll was taken by the Palestinian Center for Public Opinion, conducted by Palestinians in Arab neighborhoods. Most Arabs living in Jerusalem actually prefer living under Israeli sovereignty over Palestinian authority. I ask you, they're no different. People are people. They're no different. If you can have peace and security, you want peace and security, especially if it's coupled with freedom of expression and freedom of religion. Back in just a second. Today on the radio program, and just a few minutes ago here on Fox, I announced that we are doing a sequel, if you will, to our Restoring Honor event in Washington, D.C. last year in August. This one is called Restoring Courage, except it's not going to be held in the United States. It's going to be held in Jerusalem. And you'll see that we haven't put the final date in yet. It's amazingly complex to do something overseas. Who would have thunk it? I know a lot of people in America, at least I believe many people in America, feel that they are tired of being the world's policeman. They are tired of paying for everybody. They're tired of being asked to come in with boots on the ground. And a lot of people are saying, let the people in the Middle East solve it. And I used to feel the same way, except then 9/11 happened. And then I started doing my own homework and really looking into things. It can and will reach America. It already is. There's a class in Arizona we told you about last week. Kids are fighting to keep this horrible curriculum in school. It calls for the death of the invaders. That would be white people. The overthrow of the U.S. government. Mexico is the oppressed and America is the great oppressor. It's the same thing that they're saying about Israel in the Middle East. Except this is the great Satan, Israel is the little Satan. We have the mayor of Jerusalem, Nir Barkat, who has been so gracious to help open up his city for people, hopefully from all around the world, that will join us this August. You know, we were talking before we went into the break that people have this view of what's going on in the Middle East, and you say the facts don't fit it. And so we have a historic opportunity. What do you mean?
Well, look at what's called the Arab Spring. Nobody knows where that's headed. Look what's happening with the rise of the Hamas and this deal between the Hamas, which believes in the destruction of Israel, to the front stage. It looks like the Middle East is a big minefield. And people that are looking for resolving the conflict, it doesn't fit. The details, the things that are happening doesn't fit, because right now, when one part wants to kill the other and the other is peace-seeking, you cannot resolve the problem unless we get kicked out, which we don't intend to let happen. So right now, I do think that the right approach in the Middle East is manage the conflict rather than resolve it, and focus and see how they change their education to the youngsters, how they train their kids to seek peace like we do in our schools, like you do in America. I think that we have to make sure that we are dealing with a partner that wants to live next to us.
Do you believe you're dealing with an honest partner in the United States anymore? Because I'm concerned that the United States is not necessarily, our allies have changed. We have changed. Our administration is changing our allies, I fear. And it's not being, I mean, when I hear the president say to the people in the Middle East, you've got to go and get involved in this democracy, in this new spring, I think, it's a minefield. Why would you possibly tell everyone, run through that minefield?
Yeah. It's prudent to watch your steps and walk very, very slowly if you enter a minefield. And don't take too many risks, unless you want your foot blown off.
Right.
And I don't think anybody wants that. So we must focus on defining what's good and what's bad. I think that
Is there good and evil?
Of course there is, and we must define. And I think that the fact that the U.S. And we should applaud the president for taking out Osama bin Laden. And by the way, the Hamas blasted the U.S. for killing a martyr,
Right.
a Muslim.
Right.
And so you have to define and articulate who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. And Israel is defending itself.
I'd like to go there. We're going to take a break, and I'd like to come back and ask you two questions. One is a question that I think Americans, like I said, are tired. And we're sending aid all over the world, I don't know if you saw the beginning of the show, we're broke. We ain't good for that. People are going to have to get over it. We can't afford it anymore. But they want to be supportive. Can you be, question number one when we come back, can you be supportive of Israel and not send troops over or cash over? And the second question, I completely forgot, so maybe we'll just do that. That one. We'll be back in a second. Back with Nir Barkat. He is the mayor of Jerusalem. Final minutes with him. And I asked you at the break, can you be supportive of Israel without sending troops and without sending dollars?
For sure, without sending troops. Israel knows how to defend itself. I think the relationship is a strategic relationship. One should look at the strategic relationship not in a tactical manner. And by the way, it's a two-way street. Today, Israel is supporting and helping, with our knowledge of how to fight terror and other things we do, totally transparent to the U.S. So it's a mutual relationship. It's not a one-way relationship. And we view this strategic alliance with the U.S. As the most important strategic alliance for Israel. And we hope and believe that by shared values, by shared principles, understanding that we're the only democracy, the real democracy in the Middle East, we have so much more in common than differences, and that's the way it should stay.
When I was over there, I remembered the second question. It's about good and evil. When I was over there last week, I said to you a minute ago that I felt that people were awake. They knew, and that tends to happen when people are trying to kill you or run you into the sea. But good versus evil, I'm surprised at how many people can't see the difference between the two. If you were trying to say to people, no, look here, and show them the difference, what would you say the difference is in the situation in Israel, where you could point to it and say, good, evil?
First of all, look at the intentions of people. If the intention is to kill your neighbor, that's evil. If the intention is to leave peacefully, and you could prove and show that indeed, and that's the situation today in Jerusalem, that you have freedom of religion. Not only my religion, I'm a Jew, a proud Jew, a mayor, but I am serving the Christians and the Muslims in the city of Jerusalem. And I serve them to the best of my ability and to enable them to practice their faith their way. I believe that's opposite of evil. Check the intentions, what people want to accomplish. We want to accomplish opening up and enabling people to enjoy the city of Jerusalem. And that's why tourism is going up. That's why you had a good time when you came to Jerusalem. Yeah. That's why if people, rather than try and protest, come through the airport peace-seekingly to see the beauty of the city of Jerusalem, we will let them do that.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get Code Pink to do that. All right.
And so look at the intentions of people. The evil is the intention. And unfortunately, if you check people's intentions, you'll understand what's happening in the Middle East. Mr.
Mayor, thank you.
Thank you.
And we will see you in August.
I'm happy to host you.
Thank you. Tonight I want to give you two stories that highlight the choice that we're facing between good and evil right now. Highlight courage and compassion versus rage and revenge. On 2020, last Friday, a horribly burned woman, Stephanie Nielsen, was profiled. She's 29 years old. She's the mother of 4. She was severely burned in a plane crash. The only thing that was left unburned, I think, were her toes. On her blog, this woman talks about God and how grateful she is to be alive. On her blog, she talks about how she was at the supermarket and she overheard some kids say something insensitive like, "Look at that lady, she looks like a monster." Well, here's what Stephanie said on 2020 on Friday.
Some people are very rude and stare at you. The little kids who are just being honest, pointing and saying mean things that are mean and hurtful to me, but they're just little and they don't know. I knew that I had a self-worth that was greater than my outward appearance, but I don't dwell on it. Just that's how it is, and this is how it is, and it will probably get better, but if it doesn't, I'm fine. I have a beautiful life. That's what's beautiful.
She's one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. My gosh. This woman has chosen to take this adversity and make it into something positive. Now, let me show you the other side. It's this woman in Iran. This is a horror story. She rejected the marriage proposal of a man who was stalking her, so the man poured a bucket of acid all over her, blinding her and severely disfiguring her. She was a beautiful woman as well. Now, in Iran, justice for this kind of crime calls for an eye for an eye. So the man was sentenced to a punishment of acid being poured into his eyes. Naturally, the international community was outraged and called the sentence barbaric, which has delayed the government of Iran from carrying out this sentence. For her part, the Iranian woman, she is upset about this delay. She said, quote, "I want people like him to know that they will suffer forever if they cause someone such suffering." She wanted to do it herself. Instead, she was worried that she'd get the acid on her hands, so doctors were going to do it for her. As understandable as it is for her to feel that way, the fact is we all have a choice. We can choose hatred and vengeance, or we can strive for something higher, something better. It all comes down to what's going to help us solve the problems we face. Vengeance and hate, or compassion, love and courage. It's time for us, like Stephanie Nielsen, to choose the better part. It all starts with us as individuals. Choose courage and compassion as we strive to heal our nation and ourselves. Choose the better part, compassion and courage. Because two wrongs don't make a right, period. Never. They never do. The choice between good and evil is becoming, at least to me and my friends, more and more apparent. You have to actively choose and restore courage in your own life. You'll need the courage to do the hard thing, the hardest thing possibly of all, to break the cycle.
Coming soon, the first ever Glenn Beck Quiz Show. Think you could answer questions about the stuff Glenn's covered over the last 2 years?
I talk about the dangers of big government, collective salvation, the Tides Foundation.
If so, we'd like to put you to the test. Who does Glenn call the spooky dude?
Spooky dude.
Who does Glenn hate?
Hate this guy.
Who does Glenn love?
I love him.
Show off your Beck IQ and write in for tickets at beckquizshow@foxnews.com.
Do you understand? I was actually told that I'm competing against you in that. I don't even know if I can win. I want to tell you a couple of things, and I put this up at glennbeck.com. These are the things that I've asked you to do in the last 2 years. The 9/12 Project, which is get together with people, know that you're not alone. Take the 40-day and 40-night challenge. Be able to say, with firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, the last line of the Declaration of Independence. And then E4. Do these things. Do these things. Because, I don't know if you heard this, but there's a guy who says the end of the world, he definitely knows, is this Saturday. In case it's not the end of the world Saturday, go to glennbeck.com for all of the details on restoring courage in Jerusalem. And sign up for my free daily newsletter from New York. Good night, America.